Charlotte Bronté's Jane Eyre represents a revolutionary departure from conventional Victorian narrative techniques, employing innovative structural and stylistic elements that fundamentally transform the possibilities of prose fiction. The novel's first-person narrative voice, its complex temporal structure, and its integration of Gothic, realistic, and symbolic elements created a new model for psychological fiction that influenced generations of subsequent writers and established new standards for literary expression. The autobiographical framework of Jane Eyre was both formally innovative and thematically significant. By presenting Jane's story as a memoir written 10 years after the events concluded, Brontë created a dual perspective that allowed for both immediate emotional engagement and mature reflection. The adult Jane who narrates possesses knowledge and understanding unavailable to her younger self, creating dramatic irony and interpretive depth that enriches the reader's experience. This temporal complexity allows the novel to explore themes of memory, growth, and the relationship between experience and understanding. The narrative voice itself represents one of the novel's most significant innovations. Jane's direct, honest, and emotionally forthright narration was unprecedented in its psychological intimacy and moral authority. Unlike the omniscient narrators common in earlier fiction, Jane speaks from personal experience with a voice that is simultaneously vulnerable and strong, passionate and principled. This narrative approach creates an unprecedented sense of intimacy between reader and protagonist, while establishing Jane's credibility as both character and moral guide. Bronté's use of the Bildungsroman or coming-of-age structure provides the novel's basic organizational framework while allowing for complex exploration of psychological and social themes. The novel traces Jane's development from childhood through young adulthood, showing how each stage of her experience contributes to her final mature understanding of herself and her place in the world. This developmental structure allows Brontë to explore questions of identity, moral development, and social adaptation, while maintaining narrative unity and coherence. The novel's division into distinct geographical and temporal sections, Gateshead, Lowood, Thornfield, Marsh End, and Ferndean, creates an episodic structure that reflects different phases of Jane's development, while also representing different aspects of Victorian society. Each setting provides Jane with different challenges and opportunities for growth, while also serving symbolic functions related to the novel's thematic concerns. This structural approach allows Brontë to create both narrative variety and thematic coherence. Bronté's integration of Gothic elements into realistic domestic settings created what critics have termed domestic Gothic, a hybrid form that brought the emotional intensity and atmospheric effects of traditional Gothic literature into contemporary social settings. Thornfield Hall, with its mysterious third floor, strange nocturnal sounds, and hidden secrets, functions as a Gothic space within an otherwise realistic novel. This integration allows Brontë to explore psychological and social themes through both realistic observation and symbolic representation. The novel's treatment of the supernatural reflects Bronté's sophisticated approach to psychological realism. Jane's telepathic communication with Rochester at the novel's climax can be interpreted either as genuine supernatural phenomenon or as psychological projection of her deep emotional connection with him. This ambiguity allows readers to interpret the event according to their own beliefs while maintaining the novel's psychological credibility. Similar ambiguity surrounds other potentially supernatural elements, such as Jane's prophetic dreams and her sense of spiritual presence. Bronté's use of symbolism throughout the novel operates on multiple levels, from obvious symbolic elements like fire and ice to more subtle symbolic patterns involving light and darkness, confinement and freedom, and natural versus artificial elements. The Red Room at Gateshead, where Jane is locked as punishment, functions simultaneously as a realistic domestic space and a symbolic representation of passion, anger, and psychological trauma. This symbolic complexity allows the novel to operate on both literal and metaphorical levels. The novel's dialogue represents another area of innovation, with Brontë creating distinct voices for different characters while maintaining psychological realism and social authenticity. Jane's conversations with Rochester, in particular, demonstrate Bronte's ability to convey complex emotional and intellectual dynamics through naturalistic dialogue. Their verbal sparring reveals character, advances plot, and explores themes while maintaining the realistic speech patterns appropriate to their social positions and personalities. Bronte's handling of time within the narrative reflects careful attention to both chronological development and thematic significance. The novel covers approximately 20 years of Jane's life, from her childhood at Gateshead through her marriage to Rochester, but the narrative time is distributed unevenly to emphasize the most significant periods of development and crisis. The 10-month period at Thornfield receives detailed treatment, while other periods are compressed or summarized, creating narrative rhythm that emphasizes psychological and thematic importance over mere chronological progression. The epistolary elements within the novel, letters, documents, and other written materials, provide both plot advancement and thematic commentary. Mrs. Reed's deathbed revelation of the letter from Jane's uncle, St. John's missionary correspondence, and other documents serve to connect different parts of the narrative, while also commenting on themes of communication, family connection, and social obligation. These elements add realistic detail while also advancing the novel's exploration of literacy, education, and social mobility. Bronte's descriptive technique combines realistic observation with symbolic significance, creating settings and scenes that function simultaneously as believable environments and thematic commentary. The moors surrounding Thornfield and Marsh End serve as realistic geographical features while also symbolizing freedom, natural beauty, and spiritual connection. Similarly, the contrast between the oppressive interiors of Gateshead and Lowood and the more open spaces of Thornfield and Ferndene reflects the novel's themes of confinement and liberation. The novel's treatment of class dialect and social speech patterns demonstrates Bronte's attention to linguistic realism and social authenticity. Characters' speech patterns reflect their social positions, educational backgrounds, and regional origins, creating a sense of social authenticity while also serving characterization functions. Hannah's Yorkshire dialect, Adele's French-accented English, and the various servants' speech patterns add realistic detail while also commenting on themes of education, social mobility, and cultural difference. Bronte's use of foreshadowing and symbolic preparation creates narrative unity while building suspense and thematic coherence. Early references to fire, madness, and concealed passion prepare readers for later revelations while maintaining narrative surprise. Jane's childhood reading of Bewick's History of British Birds foreshadows her later feelings of isolation and her eventual migration to different environments. This careful preparation creates a sense of inevitability while maintaining narrative tension. The novel's conclusion demonstrates Bronte's sophisticated approach to resolution and closure. Rather than simply providing a conventional happy ending, the final chapters show Jane and Rochester achieving equality through mutual sacrifice and growth. Rochester's physical disability and spiritual humbling balance Jane's social elevation through inheritance, creating a relationship based on mutual dependence and respect, rather than traditional gender hierarchy. This resolution satisfies both romantic expectations and thematic requirements. The influence of Jane Eyre's narrative innovations on subsequent fiction cannot be overstated. The novel's psychological realism, first-person narrative authority, and integration of social criticism with personal story became models for later writers seeking to explore complex themes through individual experience. The domestic Gothic mode that Brontë pioneered influenced writers from Wilkie Collins to Henry James, while her treatment of women's psychological complexity paved the way for later feminist fiction.